Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Polarizer Podcast. Today I'm talking with Guido Lange. He's actually Marnix's older brother. You've heard Marnix on the show many times before. He's been on 3 times, and I will be sure to link to those episodes in the show notes as well. So check out thepolarizer.com for all the episode information and show notes. There's a lot of show notes for this episode because we talk about a lot of interesting things. And today we are talking about nuclear stuff, about atoms and neutrons, and what else? You can be an intro to today.
Nice. Protons, electrons, fusion reactions.
Fusion reaction, yeah, we're talking about fusion reactions and fission reactions and nuclear waste and nuclear bombs. Actually, well, we haven't talked that much about nuclear bombs, a little bit, but that's we should talk about it next time too. But so there's a lot of very interesting plasma too. Yeah, that was
that's
big
what we started off with. Yeah,
we did. Yeah. So this is well, how would you call this podcast, man?
From plasma to fusion, first steps.
From plasma to fusion. I'm just gonna call it from plasma to fusion.
Yeah, from plasma to fusion. Yeah,
that's a good name.
We missed the fission part of it actually.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we shouldn't make this too long because we already went forever in this episode. So if this sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. Tell all your friends about it. Tweet all your friends and Facebook all your friends and all that bullshit. Blah, 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 blah. Enjoy the show, motherfuckers.
Recorded someplace random on this interesting planet we live on with your host, Dick Hube. You're listening to the Polarizer Podcast.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go. And your mic's falling over.
Yeah.
I added these. I added suspension to my microphones since last episode, and it's great because you don't hear a loud bang whenever we move anything on the table. But the downside is that it's added some weight, and my mic stand, they don't have enough counterweight to deal with that. So there you go. That's I'm sure you have a nice English saying for that too, like you fall before you need to walk or something. Something like that. I mean, you know what I'm saying. Well, anyway, right now I'm very excited to talk to you because you are, first of all, a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a very long time. Like we were probably from the time we both started to play outside, we know each other. So
Exactly.
Probably since 3 years old or something.
4.
4?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And you are also a physicist.
That's true.
Which is something I find very, very fascinating. And your field is applied physics, right?
Yeah, that's what I studied.
And your specialization was nuclear fusion.
That's correct. Yeah.
Which is tremendously interesting because that could lead to infinite energy, right?
Yeah, well, nothing is infinite, of course, but we have plenty. Yeah.
Okay.
Like for billions of years, we would have sufficient deuterium in seawater.
Okay.
So,
wow.
and yeah, that's a time scale in which we need to think of moving to another planet because the sun gets too large. So that will do. Yeah.
But deuterium, you said?
Yeah.
What's that? Or you know what? Let's start at the beginning because I personally know a little bit about how nuclear energy works. Not a whole lot, but I kind of know the basics, sort of.
Okay.
Not everyone does. So the way a nuclear power plant works is you split an atom and that generates heat. And with that heat, you heat water and that generates steam. And then you use that steam pressure to create kinetic energy, and then you transform that into electricity, basically. And instead of splitting an atom, you try to fuse atoms, very different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's true. They need to overcome some barrier to get close to one another in order to fuse, because they're all it's hot enough that the particles are all charged.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's a plasma. So normally an atom is neutral.
Okay.
So that means that there's as much electrons and protons in the nucleus, and electrons around it. So
what are electrons? And
okay, so atoms are made of 3 fundamental composites.
Okay. And an atom is one of the smallest parts that we.
Yeah, that's the smallest part of material that still has its own material properties.
Okay.
So it defines what kind of material properties it has.
Okay.
So like oxygen, it's a gas at room temperature and we breathe it. Nitrogen is also a gas at room temperature. There's 80% of it in the air. But iron, for example, that's a solid at room temperature, and that's all. Those are all atoms.
Okay.
So yeah, so in every atom there's a certain constellation of protons and neutrons in the nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
And
the nucleus is the thing that.
That's the inner part of it.
Okay.
So it's really small, although really heavy, and around it circles some cloud of electron mass. We will come to that later when we talk quantum mechanics, because that's all about how those clouds form. But there are particles, and they are in a certain amount around the nucleus. And when it gets hotter and hotter, the outer shell of the electrons gets loose, because the connections are stressed too much because of the heat. Because heat is actually nothing more than
vibration, right?
Yeah, really heavy movement, jiggling all around. And when it gets harder, you jiggle more and more, and then you bump into one another, like I'm with my mic right now.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah, so you bump into one another, and the outer shell of electrons let loose. Electrons are charged, and they are charged negatively.
Okay.
And protons are charged positively. Exactly the same amount, however, negative versus positive. And when the electrons let loose, then you have ions with a positive charge and electrons with a negative charge flowing all around each other.
What are ions?
Ions are charged particles.
Okay.
So that's a general term for it. And they are charged positively because the electrons are charged negatively, but they are flown away. And when a gas is in such a state that you have electrons and ions flowing through each other, around each other, then you talk of a plasma.
Okay.
And the plasma is actually, so you can say, think of it like the fourth state of matter. Like you have solids, you have fluids, you have gases, and you have plasmas. Right. And like the sun is a hot ball of hydrogen helium plasma.
Okay.
And their fusion reactions happen in the center.
Okay, so and my guess is very uneducated guess would be that for there to be a plasma, they need to even one another out. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Okay, yeah.
And when you start with a neutral gas, then they even each other out by definition, because it's neutral. So if you start to heat it up, then the electrons let loose. But if you contain everything in a certain container, then you can make sure that the plasma stays neutral in its on a whole at all times. However, on the micro scale, it's not neutral. They're charged. There are oscillations going on
within
the plasma. Yeah. So, like for example, if an ion moves a little bit in this direction, electrons are moving in the other direction, and you start to get a small electric field.
Okay.
And a small oscillating electric field and a small oscillating magnetic field together makes radio waves, makes light waves. So that's the fundamental force of nature, the electromagnetic force that creates all kind of the light waves, the electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay.
So like what we're listening to now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So all kind of different phenomena happen in plasmas, like turbulence and other kind of interesting repeating phenomena, complex behavior. And you try to make use of it to contain the plasma as much as possible and to make sure the hot particles are close to one another. And also you suffer from it because all those kind of turbulences can damage the wall of your machine.
Okay.
When they burst.
Okay.
So
it's very volatile and very hard to contain, and it's
and hard to control actually.
Hard to control.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
But so plasma is basically the hottest it can get.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. And is that my guess is that it's different for every particle, or is it just a final heat where everything just turns to plasma?
No, that's true. You have got plasmas of different temperatures.
Okay.
And at different temperatures, something will start to be a plasma, and that's all due to how the atom looks like, because how strong the electromagnetic force is to have the outer electron in the shell. In order to make it a plasma, it needs to let loose, but the force, the strength of it, that's due to what kind of atom it is attached to.
Okay, right. Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah. Everything indeed makes sense to a certain extent.
It hurts my brain to try to conceptualize it.
I must say this is a lot of information at once.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
But it's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's so cool. All right, I'm gonna check on the ribs for a second.
Cool,
because they're in there for a little while now. See if they're still good. All right, we're back. Ribs are looking good, steady, smoky. Let's
give it another
20 minutes or so, and then low temperature, slow cooking, man. I love it so much, man. Big green egg or a Kamado Joe. If you have the chance to get one, you should, because it's the coolest thing. Well, anyway. We were talking about where to go next, because this is a very complicated subject, a subject that I'm pretty ignorant about. And so I just asked you, what's the logical next thing we should talk about before getting to the final question? Like, what's nuclear fusion all about, and why is it such a big deal?
Right.
So we established plasma, sort of. In the cliff notes, I guess.
Yeah. So
because I'm sure there's entire libraries written about that alone, right?
About plasmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a field of study in its own, and it's not only applied for nuclear fusion. Plasmas are used in industry widely to make small variations on a chip, or doing really
so the chips in your phone,
depositing of layers of chips, depositing of that, and make that really fine grained and stuff.
Wow!
So that's what plasmas are industry.
So how does that work? Man, there are so many rabbit holes, man.
Yeah. So this is maybe one small bridge from plasmas in general to then we talk about the fusion reaction.
Okay.
So one thing about plasmas is because it's another state of matter, it also interacts in its own way with other states of matter. Like it interacts with a solid wall, but it interacts differently with a fluid wall. You can also think of a fluid wall with a plasma. But first the solid wall, then...
Oh, it's a dog. Dog is listening to our conversation too.
So first the solid wall, if it's made from another material, like for example tungsten, and there's a hydrogen plasma bumping onto it, small tungsten particles may get into the plasma, and they quickly deionize or neutralize the plasma, because so many electrons in the outer shell get loose, because it makes also part of the plasma again.
Right.
But it directly, burst out the flame of plasma that's in the machine, because all ions get neutralized very fast.
So it's also very fragile.
Yeah. So and that's something for in nuclear fusion reactors. That's one of the big challenges, actually, how to think of the correct wall around the plasma. So the diverter, the outlet actually of plasma particles, need to interact with the wall, but you don't want wall particles get back into the plasma. It's really difficult how to make a proper arrangement of that shape of electromagnetic waves.
Okay.
So
but that because you said earlier that it's extremely volatile and unpredictable, it's almost impossible to come up with a good wall, I would think, as someone who knows nothing about this.
Yeah, and yet there's being built several machines doing nuclear fusion on a big scale.
Really?
There's a machine in England. It's called the Jet tokamak. And that has reached break even. And with that, it's meant exactly the amount of heat power you put in, you got out from the fusion reactions inside.
Okay.
So this is actually a big leap towards, before we need to talk about fusion, but towards what the machines are currently doing and achieving.
Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of heat. Yeah, it makes sense. It takes a lot of heat to
create a plasma and to heat it up enough to make fusion reactions.
Right. So you need to, of course, you hope that you get more out of it than you put into it.
That's eventually the goal for an energy source. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an energy source at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Of course. When you break it down like that, I'm like, fuck, I'm dumb.
No, it's really deep insights, but they're all logical.
It makes so much
logical
sense
in some sense. But you do already a lot of repetition in deep insights after one another.
Yeah.
To understand the simplicity of
exactly.
It. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Wow. But whenever I talk about this with you, like I can feel that my brain is basically at the edge of what it's capable of when I'm trying to conceptualize this and understand why it makes sense. It's but it's so interesting, man.
Yeah.
So there's machines out there that don't lose energy by creating nuclear fusion.
That is true. However, it is still you mentioned how nuclear fission reactors work, like being a big steam engine that creates electricity.
Yeah,
there's nothing being done with the heat that you put out, so there's no electricity being made yet.
Okay.
So you need to have a higher ratio to cope with the conversion losses you have later in the process.
Right.
Because the efficiency of a steam turbine
is not very good.
That's not very good. You reach 40% when you want to create enough kinetic energy to create the electric energy by magnets.
And that's still the only way we know how to do it, right?
It is true. So that's always some odd fact about also fusion as a field as a field in total. It's actually a very expensive way to cook water.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, a very expensive water cooker you want to make. That's basically.
It's so weird that on the one side, the part of creating a nuclear fusion power plant, like the one side, the nuclear fusion part, that's probably one of the most complicated things mankind has ever worked on. And then we use, once we figure that out, we're going to just heat up some water and get some wheels moving. And then, so that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But despite of the huge kinetic loss, a nuclear power plant is still much more efficient than a coal power plant, and there's no waste and all that. So
that's true. Yeah.
If you look at like 1 unit of uranium compared to 1 unit of coal or gas or oil, and the amount of energy difference that's in that same volume.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more energy is there in it's like 20,000 times more than coal or something.
I forgot the numbers on
something
this
ridiculous.
because this is actually the difference between two total different regimes of reactions.
Okay.
Because one is the chemical reactions that are due to the electrons in the outer shells and in the inner shells. Those are the chemical reactions, and that's with burning stuff. Burning stuff is doing chemical reactions. But splitting uranium, then you go to the nuclear reactions, and that's a way stronger force in nature that holds together the different atoms, and therefore atoms are very small compared to what they in the world they live in. And so in the nucleus, that's a very strong force needed to get all these this ionized protons together, which are all positively charged, but nevertheless inside the nucleus they want to stay together. So there's a force even stronger than the electric repulsion between the two protons, a force that's even stronger that holds two repelling protons together. And that's the nuclear reaction. And that's exactly what you want to use when you do fusion. Because two big logs of protons and neutrons together, they have a small nuclear force. But two protons compared to their mass, it's so strong, the repulsion, that if you overcome that bridge by doing the fusion reactions, by tunneling to one another, by fusing slowly.
Mm-hmm. Is it slowly?
Slowly in the sense that there's some potential that starts off like by chance, by tunneling.
Okay.
And then quickly the chance of fusing together, that really depends a little bit on the cross section you have when two of those atoms meet each other. So the cross section, the chance that you fuse, that depends on.
They need to actually physically collide with each other.
Physically collide, yeah. So and then having a chance of staying together.
Okay.
But when they do, then they stay together and they form a new particle, namely helium. That's what happens in the fusion reaction. In a fusion reactor, you have deuterium, what I mentioned in the beginning, and tritium. And those are two isotopes of water, of hydrogen, actually. Hydrogen is one proton, deuterium is one proton with a neutron, and tritium is one proton with two neutrons in the nucleus. So, and there are two nuclei, one with an extra neutron and one with two. They fuse together and they become an alpha particle. That's helium. And that's two protons, two neutrons in the nucleus. But hey, we had another neutron, right? And that's true, because the other neutron that flies on its own, that's just a neutron, not anymore being able to make part of the plasma, because the plasma was charged particles, but the neutron just flies out of the machine because it cannot be banned by the magnetic forces anymore.
So it becomes useless at that point.
Well, no, then it starts. It's hot.
Oh, of course.
That's a hot particle, so it flies until the wall, and in the wall it needs to be stopped by several layers of concrete. But before even a blanket to make new tritium atoms, and to give off the heat to the cooling system, that eventually is the heat exchange to your steam generator.
Okay.
So the neutrons are actually the outlet in terms of heat.
Okay.
And that's what you constantly catch by the wall, and there you convert the heat, and then you put it into your steam engine.
Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. That yeah. That's I guess that's I can sort of kind of. I mean, it went very fast for me, but it was I think I understand what you're saying, kind of. So wow, that's cool. Okay, well,
am I going too fast? You think?
No, it's good. It's good. It's just like because I'm listening to you and I'm trying to understand it, and at the same time I'm trying to measure what the average person would know about this.
Right.
And we probably lost a couple of people along the way, but that's that's fine. We'll just we'll talk about other stuff too later. But so I get what you're saying, and I get the concept on the basic level, but it's a lot of very complex information and abstractions I have to make to really. Because you talk about walls, and you visualize an actual wall, and of course there is a wall, but we're talking about the skill that you can even see, but it's fascinating, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our ribs are about done by now, so I suggest we take a bite and cool off a little bit and then continue.
All right, cool.
All right, thanks, dude. I'm really enjoying this so far. So
nice.
Thank you. Cheers. Cheers, man. All right, my dude.
Cheerio.
Cheerio. I just banged my espresso cup to Guido's beer glass, which is why it was funny.
Yeah.
So we left off. Where did we leave off? And by the way, those ribs are awesome, man. I hope I'm not too distracted by the fact that I'm still enjoying the afterglow of eating some awesome ribs. So, but we talked about plasma. And you went pretty deep into the mechanics of how nuclear fusion works. And how would you explain the fundamental difference between nuclear fusion and nuclear, what do you call it?
Fission.
Fission, yeah.
So let's start off with
a little bit closer on the mic. Yeah.
Right. That's the difference. Yeah. So this is a story about how nuclei are bound together. Nuclei are bound in itself, depending on how much protons and how much neutrons are in that nucleus. In other words, depending on what kind of atom it is, having the tendency to fuse with one another, or rather to split. And that is, if you would look to the smallest atoms, like hydrogen, or the larger ones like uranium.
Oh, by the way, let's move our chairs. Let's be a little bit more comfortable and natural, man. Like, because you're looking to the side the entire time while you're talking to me. So let's move this mic stand here. There we go. It's a very professional production, ladies and gentlemen. This is our. There you go. We're running a radio station right here. No, I think it's
Radio Station 101. Let's start.
NBC.
Yeah. So if you would look how the smallest atoms like hydrogen, or the larger ones like uranium, which has already a weight of 235 times the weight of hydrogen. So that's really a large clump of protons and neutrons in the nucleus, all bound together by the strong nuclear force. And when another particle like a neutron hits that a little bit lumpy and unstable cloud of neutrons and protons, they have a possibility to split into smaller ones, like half the size or about half the size. And those can be radioactive as well. That's what the nuclear waste actually is.
Okay.
So the reaction product of it.
And I know this is going down a different rabbit hole, but what is radiation exactly? From if I remember correctly, was it non-ionizing? All right, let's. All right, I'll tell you what I know, and you tell me if I'm right.
Okay.
Difference between dangerous radiation and not dangerous radiation is when dangerous radiation changes whatever it hits, and not dangerous radiation doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. That's where the ionizing part of it comes into place. So
can you explain that as simple as you can?
Like we talked about ions before.
Yes.
That was with electrons in the plasma. So when some radiation that is from electromagnetic waves comes into it and is strong enough, it can ionize it by removing the outer electrons again.
Okay, however, ionizing means that it changes it, right?
Yeah, well, ionizing first means that it got ionized, and that is that it becomes charged. So the outer electrons become loose from the material.
Okay.
So, and then when it's ionized, it has all different kind of chemical properties again.
Okay.
And it wants to bind to other stuff, making salts, for example. And so, yeah, that's what radiation can do. But what is radiation? The good answer to it, there's different types of radiation.
Okay.
So we now experience a nice warm evening radiation.
Right.
In the form of light. And that's, like I said, electromagnetic waves.
Yes.
You also have particle radiation, like alpha radiation. That's the alpha particle. That is the helium, that is the fusion reaction product. So you have beta radiation, that is radiation from electrons. And you have gamma radiation, and gamma radiation is the electromagnetic waves.
Okay.
So, and the particle that is the transmitter of that wave. So that is deep into quantum mechanics, the duality between waves and particles. But there's also connected to the electromagnetic wave is a particle, a light particle, and that's called the photon. You probably have heard of it for once. Yeah. So, yeah, the whole business of handling how light and radiation is transmitted.
So the radio waves that come from FM radio and your microwave and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth,
mm-hmm.
that's a non-ionizing radio wave, right?
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
Okay. All right.
As long as it's not firm enough, like Röntgen radiation, like the really short wavelength.
Like the X-ray.
Yeah. X-ray, exactly. So that's also the same form, although a different frequency, but it's exactly the same kind of behavior.
Okay.
Like light.
But it becomes dangerous when the frequency is really high, or?
Yeah, because then it contains a lot of energy and it can burn into you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what happens when you get a sunburn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or burned by a laser to
right
to do dangerous stuff.
Huh. Okay, so all right. Give me a second here, man. Well, like I said before, like after you tell me all this, I'm still like thinking about it and putting it together, and usually that takes me. That's why I like to go on long walks by myself. And that's why I sometimes like to just get in my car and take a drive and just drive around, and so it's not good. It's not good for a podcast. So, but Yeah, okay. So with nuclear fission, you split atoms, and then, right, you get a lot of heat because they when they split, a lot of energy that's in there gets Gesundheit.
Okay.
Gets freed, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and gets freed in the form of neutrons and, just also a photon, I believe.
Yeah, I think so, because when a nuclear bomb explodes, you first get a very bright flash. Or is it something different? It's essentially the same, I think, but I know nothing. So,
yeah, maybe you're right. Not sure.
Because that's one thing
because it can also be what you see due to the air that's burst into flames, not the reaction itself.
No, actually, like if you're like really far away from a nuclear bomb exploding, if you look at it, the light flash will destroy your vision.
All right.
And so there's also a crazy amount of photons, I think.
Yeah, that has to be the case then.
Yeah. So if you can still be far away from the blast to not get the radio waves, but you can still get your eyes damaged or ruined from the flash.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. If I talk about this shit, I'm like, what the fuck, you know? And I guess, I mean, it's the same exact process, right? But it's much more violent and much less controlled.
Yeah. So here we are on the topic of what's a chain reaction.
Okay.
Because that's a fundamental difference between fission and fusion, is that the fission reaction is actually a chain reaction.
Okay.
And so one split atom makes a reaction product and other neutrons that can split other atoms, etc., etc.
Right.
So it can continue if you and if you do nothing, it will grow eventually.
Right.
And
it's what do you call it? Like the skill that goes, the further it goes, the steeper it goes.
Yeah, the exponential growth.
Exponential, yeah, of course, exponential. Yeah.
So that's exactly what happens, and you need to control in a fission power plant. You need to control the chain reaction. So you need to cool it constantly. And there's various reactor schemes doing several different stuff, but it's also always about some critical mass that can't be too high, because otherwise you have too much reaction and you cannot control it. And the fusion reaction is exactly the opposite. You need to keep heating it in order to have the plasma particles close to each other. Because if you stop heating it, the plasma particles will expand and there's not enough density and temperature in the core. So the pressure in the core is not high enough anymore to get the fusion reaction running. So that's a fundamental difference. When something happens and you stop heating it, the plasma will stop.
So it's a lot safer too.
That's it. Therefore, it's a lot safer too.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it's literally the exact opposite of a nuclear power plant, which makes sense because splitting and fusing are the opposite, but of course everything around is going to be the exact opposite too.
Yeah. So that's true, and that's all about the tendency that atoms have to split or to fuse.
And by the way, that's also why I just love this subject, because it just makes so much sense. Like it's just, when you hear it, it's like, oh yeah, fuck it. Even if you know nothing about this, there's everything in there is such a fundamental truth, and that's, I love it. It's very cool, especially with all the woo-woo science going on right now, so that's,
this is story with rules. Yeah. Because it's
and there's no arguing with those rules, and the rules don't care about your feelings, and
no, that's true.
It's
and are not about how smart you are or how much
it just is.
Yeah, and eventually, and that's what you do with physics. You have some nice idea and you check with experiment. You verify.
Right.
You make a hypothesis in which you say, okay, I think this happens when you alter from this state to that state, and you build some device that shows it. But if the experiment turns out to be stating otherwise, then the experiment is
successful.
But then the law doesn't hold.
Yeah, exactly. There's no. Of course, there's egos everywhere, but it wouldn't help anyone, you know.
No.
And then again, there's not much room for that either, because if someone says no, this is true, and no, the science says this, and the science is always right. So.
Yeah, but until you find another thing, it's constantly trial and error, and you need to. That's how science progressed.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful method.
Falsify ideas.
Yeah.
So you predict something, and the experiment can be really successful when the prediction doesn't come out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's. I still wonder how we ever came up with that. It's such a genius idea, really.
That's years of evolutions of thinking, actually.
Yeah,
because it's really deep, fundamented in philosophy as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Like Karl Popper, the philosopher scientist who came out with the philosophy of science, I believe it was.
Okay,
and he was the one who quite formally stated things about falsifying things and trying to find the black swan. If you state that all swans are white, then finding one black swan is stronger than finding 1,000 or even 1,000,000 white swans. Right?
That's very true.
And that's falsifying ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow I feel we're there's a, I don't know, there's a weird anti-movement against that going at the moment. I feel there's like everyone's just talking about feelings, and you know, like, oh, this is my truth, you know, or I feel, you know, that whole thing. It's I don't know where it came from, but it wasn't around 10 years ago. This weird, like, you know, political correctness thing, like science can be racist and shit like that, you know.
Yeah, well, I think or
sexist or whatever it is. It's but I don't want to talk about politics, but I just
right. Well, it seems perhaps that they sometimes try to bite each other, but actually the different fields don't have to be. It's about different things. Science is about science things.
Yeah.
Science is not about the feeling aspect. Okay, yeah, something that science doesn't.
The thing is, though, like people are trying to. I get the feeling that a lot of people kind of want to bring feelings into science. I don't know. It's whatever. I mean, I don't want to, because that's a whole different road we can go down on. Yeah. Jesus.
Something for later.
Well,
the science of feelings.
Yeah, not to going down on. All right, so we were talking about nuclear fission. So you generate a lot of heat by splitting an atom.
Yep.
And then you also get a bunch of byproducts that are not so good. So to do nuclear fission, you need uranium. Why uranium?
Uranium is a typical example of some big, not so stable atom.
Okay.
And it's about the instability that makes it a good candidate. You have other candidates too, like thorium, which is about in the same mass range. But they are big lumps and they're not so stable. And not so stable means...
I've also heard things about thorium reactors. It's like the same principle with a different material.
Yeah. That's thorium.
Okay.
Like uranium is a different atom than thorium.
Right.
So uranium is, I believe, 91 protons. Is that true? It has a mass of 235 or 238, where 235, I believe, is the fissile one. And it has to be enriched to a high enough level from 38 to 35.
But enriching, what's that? That's like taking the best parts and putting it together or something?
And trying to shake the neutrons out so that it becomes a different isotope. And the isotope is less stable and prone to fission reactions. And when a neutron flies in, it easy fissiles. It easily, starts to split.
Okay.
And
right, so before they can actually do it properly, they need to modify it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful night, man. Birds. Early summer, my favorite time of year, man. It's not too hot. It's just nice.
Yeah, nice and quiet.
Yeah. All right, so you split the atoms, and then you get a lot of heat, and you also get radiation.
Yeah, well, you get byproducts, and they radiate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are those byproducts? Like, I'm trying to see it visually. So you got a nuclear power plant, and you got the uranium. What does it look like?
Like it comes in rods.
It's a rod, yeah.
Yeah. So it's in rods. I believe it's a metal too. Yeah. So it's rods, and it's sometimes, I believe, uranium packed in pebbles of like carbon who capture the neutrons that fly out. So slowly break down the neutrons already. So start to cool them.
Okay, so they're just basically metal rods, if you would see it.
Yeah, and done in composite, caught in composite pebbles.
Okay.
Or with composite around it, carbon.
Okay.
To slow down the neutrons, and that's already the heat starting to come out, and then distribute the heat properly, because that's what you want to do. You have a very dense reaction.
Right.
And what you want to do is distribute the heat in such a way that it goes to your water cooker in an efficient way, in a sustainable way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then they put these rods into a bath, and that starts to heat up the water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened at Chernobyl and Fukushima was when the cooling didn't work, right? Or I think Chernobyl was some weird experiment gone wrong, because I read an article about it, and it turned out that it was just a bunch of mad Russian scientists who wanted to see what happens if you just turn the cooling off in a reactor like that. And it was an old design too, from like an outdated design that's not used anymore today, and it was outdated in the 80s already, so it was like some very archaic machine. And then they were like, well, let's see what happens if we just turn the cooling off. And then a meltdown happened. And what happens when that happens?
I forgot a bit how Chernobyl worked, but the meltdown is the way.
Well, a meltdown is like a general thing that can happen in any power plant, right?
In any fission power plant, yes.
Yeah, fission, of course.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
That's one thing too. You got to be precise with your language, man.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you compare the various ones in quite a detail.
Yeah, I'm being a bad interviewer.
No, it's okay. So then the chain reaction cannot be cooled anymore. So it goes on and goes on and goes on, and you have some.
It's like a diesel motor that just goes, you lose control over.
Yeah, well, but then even there's no cycle in it too. There's only growth of it. So it becomes that hot that it sinks just through all the material, all the wall material of the bottom of the
bath.
reactor, the bath. Yeah, exactly. Right. So
so it literally melts through concrete and steel and everything.
Yeah.
Like nothing is safe from it.
No, and so therefore it can sink really deep and then damage the machine fastly. And nothing, you cannot add something to cool. You cannot put water on it, or because the radiation is so fast in the vicinity of it.
Yeah, water just instantly evaporates. And turns into a gas.
Then
probably
sending people. No, you don't send people to the place to water the thing.
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to do.
So once
can go on for weeks.
Yeah. But once that starts, there's no way of stopping it either.
No, exactly. And that's an advantage you would have in fusion power plants. Like I said, when you stop heating it, it stops. The reaction stops.
Okay, right. So it would be probably the safest energy source too. Because you just
there's nothing harmful to solar panels and wind farms either.
Well, but yeah. Well, then again, but those solar panels, they're made of, I think there's some rare materials in there too. And windmills, it's made of aluminum and it's mechanical and it, you need to maintain them. And
that's true. But as far as now is understood, you also need to maintain a fusion reactor. Like sometimes you need to change the wall material around the diverter.
What I'm trying to say is the amount of energy you would get out of it, it's just on such a different kind of level that everything else is instantly kind of bullshit.
No, that won't be true, actually.
Really?
No. I would foresee a future in which fusion makes up, for example, 20% of the energy production.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's on a global economical level, it's far more efficient to distribute the energy need over different energy sources rather than fully using one.
Right. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
yeah, I actually did research in this. I published an article in this on this topic.
Where can people find that? It might be.
I can send you a link.
What is? Yeah, just email me a link. I'll put it in the show notes. So check out. By the way, if you're listening to this, if you go to thepolarizer.com, you'll see all the podcasts there. And with every podcast, there's a lot of show notes and more information and links to books and websites and everything we talk about. So check out the website. Lots of cool other shit on there as well. But what's the name of your article? It's probably people can find it if it's a published article. They can find it in the database.
Yeah, that's true. And you look via Google Scholar, etc.
Yeah.
But I forgot the name of the article.
Right. Well. Yeah. Anyway, I'll put it in the notes. Yeah. Huh. And so 20%, huh?
Yeah, or something like that. It can be 10. It can be 30.
Wow, that kind of shatters my dream of like infinite energy and
everything is limited.
Yeah.
When it comes down to doing concrete stuff, then for the fusion reaction to have this, I briefly talked about it, to have this tritium isotope of hydrogen. Deuterium you can find in seawater, plenty, and it's stable. Tritium is not stable. It is not abundant just in nature. So you need to make it somehow.
Okay.
And I want to make it with the neutrons that come out of the fusion plasma that bump into the wall and bump into lithium blankets. And then a reaction happens that the lithium splits out a tritium and some other particle.
Okay.
And so after this happens, the tritium goes back into the plasma and becomes a fuel, or the plasma is fueled in this way.
Okay. Holy shit.
And so also fusion takes up quite some lithium to get going. And yeah, we have quite some lithium batteries right now, and that's also a finite source.
Right.
So also in the long run, we even need to think about lithium resources.
Right.
Does it
take a lot? Well, shit, we still need to mine a bunch of shit to make this happen. Fuck. I mean, it was. I mean, it's probably. Of course, it's a stupid idea. But I had this vision, like, oh well, once we figure this out, we don't have to mine anything anymore. We just have this magic shit going on because we're just putting atoms together and then they fuse, and that's all good. But now I realize, well, shit, things ain't so simple.
We reach that goal. And that's when we reach DD fusion.
DD fusion?
Yeah, deuterium can also fuse with each other.
What's
or deuterium and helium. Deuterium is the other isotope of water with one neutron in the nucleus. So one proton and one neutron makes up a deuterium. Just one proton is a hydrogen atom. And hydrogen that's, part of H2O. of water. So
cops are looking for you, man.
yeah. Hi, Mom. So
I lost your train of thought. You were talking about sending atoms through a lithium blanket and how that helps fuel the plasma, and then I went on about that we still need to mine stuff to make it work, and that kind of ruined my idea of just having this magic energy source that will create a utopia on Earth.
Yeah. So you need to mine stuff, and that's because of the deuterium-tritium reaction, which has a larger cross-section and gives more energy.
Okay.
So that's the reaction that's favorite when it comes to building an energy reactor, an energy source. So, but when you can have higher magnetic fields and a higher confinement, you can also move on to the fusion of deuterium and deuterium, and you only need seawater for it. If you can manage to, because that's the criterion, to harvest energy from it. Because if you can't, you're not an energy source, and you just do some nice playful activity.
Right.
But so then it becomes it comes down to what a fusion reaction precisely is in terms of energy. So it's a cross section and some the fusing of two rather point-like spherically symmetric particles also becomes some strange geometric dance in terms of a wave.
Okay.
Because that's also where the wave-particle duality from quantum mechanics happen. So they're a wave and fuse as a wave into one another. Because otherwise they can't. You need quantum mechanics to understand this.
Okay.
Then you have some distribution over a cross-section, so how close they are to one another, and their velocity, so how fast they move. They pass along one another. So if they have an ideal speed and an ideal cross-section to make the fusion reaction happen, and outside of that idealness, you have some curve happening, and you want to start to find the peak of the curve, and therefore the fusion reactors on Earth need to have 10-fold the temperature as you have in the sun, in the core of the sun.
Holy shit.
Because the fusion reactions in the sun are easy because it's such a huge cloud of hydrogen atoms. They, although very small, have a small attraction. And that's gravity. And in the center, the pressure is high enough to have a lot of fusion, like what we experience every day.
With the sun, yeah.
Yeah. But on Earth, you can't have that pressure of that huge gravity cloud.
Right.
And so you need to have other schemes. And they do it with magnets. Magnets around the plasma, they keep the plasma particles moving in a donut shape. Oh.
And it takes a lot of energy to magnetize things too, right?
Yes, and then it's heated by beams, neutral beams or beams of radio frequent particles.
Right.
And
I'm still following you, but I'm redlining right now.
So then you put a lot of heat in you store it in some, you contain it with magnetic waves or with magnetic coils. And therefore you can reach densities and temperatures in the core that have also pressures high enough to do the fusion reactors, really in the core of the machine.
Okay.
And there the temperature and density get so high that, the pressure is high enough to bring the particles close enough together.
Okay. So you So you're saying we're creating something that's 10 times hotter than the sun on Earth?
Than the core of the sun, yeah, exactly. So
the
that's,
core of the sun.
Yeah, and the core of the sun is 15 million degrees. And 10 times hotter is 150 million degrees Celsius.
And we're creating that on Earth, and we're actually doing it, you know? How fucking crazy is that, dude? Jesus. Oh, you're blowing my mind, man. That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane, and especially when you think
that's insane. I can't. I'm trying to the numbers are just crazy, but I'm trying to grasp it. I can't. But fuck, even if I get like 1% of it within grasping it, that's still just so mind blowing that it hurts, man. Jesus, that's crazy. All right, so we're actually doing this already. We're managing to create something that's 10 times hotter than the sun, than the core of the sun.
Not yet. That's one of the goals for ITER, the machine that's currently being built in the south of France.
Okay. In France.
Yeah. So it's a global project like Europe, America, China, Japan, India, Korea, Russia are in it.
Wow.
Europe for the biggest part, but all parties have their contribution in it.
Right.
And it's being built in the south of France. Then Japan, always a hard one when it comes to negotiations.
Right.
Was allowed to bring the most scientists, and later the amounts changed. And it's a lot of politics going on because it's such a huge investment. We're now talking already about 15 billion euros. For the machine.
Okay, for the machine.
For the machine, the experiment being built, and the number is increasing probably. So that means that eventually for your kilowatt hour of electricity, you need to end up with way cheaper machines that are being built far more easily than this, because this is when something costs $1 billion. And you produce 1 gigawatt with it, nominal power, then it costs $1 per watt.
Okay.
And you need to be in the range of a few dollars a watt to be a competitive energy source in the current energy market.
Okay, right.
And that's a number you need to strive for, and that's a number that you need to develop into. And here you start to think about the economics of an energy source, like how fast can you grow from 1 reactor to 10 reactors to 100 reactors, the exponential growth path of an energy source. And that's even after you left the lab, after you already successfully demonstrated prototypes.
Yeah. Well, this doesn't sound like something that would be easily mass produced.
No, not yet. And mass produced, it will be always a big step. It's far more bigger than placing 1 extra solar panel on it.
Yeah.
So therefore, solar panels have a huge rate of replacement.
Right. Well,
and it can grow very fast because of it. You can grow faster if you have a high rate of replacement, because every year you need to build new factories to build the next generation, and it really goes way more slower if 1 reactor and the other one are 10 years ahead of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about all that. I mean, but it makes so much sense. So okay, and that's that's given that we actually managed to turn it into an energy source.
Yeah.
Because we're not there yet, right?
For fusion, not there yet. ITER is the one that demonstrates a 10-fold power multiplication. So 10 times as much energy in terms of fusion heat compared to the input heat.
Mm-hmm.
But
then you also need to make your input heat really efficient.
Yes, and
you will probably do it with nuclear fission, maybe.
No, you don't do it.
Okay. Or is that stupid what I'm saying now?
Yes, you.
Yes, okay.
so you create. No, well, it's not stupid. So you create. You have heat sources like some radio frequent generator. Okay, you can do it with the electricity generated from a fission power plant some miles away of you. Yeah. But anyway.
But that wouldn't be the right way to do it.
No, but because that's all part of getting there, getting to be an energy source. And when you are, then you also are generating more than you have in. But you've also always the conversion losses of the water or the steam reactor.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 times as much power multiplication is not even enough to have economically a viable machine,
right?
Because
you lose so much power.
You lose a lot of power by converting steam to electricity.
Right.
So it needs to be 40 or so. And therefore, ITER, the energy that they gain from it, nothing will be done with it. It's just to demonstrate, and there's a lot of diagnostics and heating systems all to test and all doing science, actually. Science on materials is one of the biggest challenges, like I said. And the turbulence in the machine, like controlling turbulent behavior and islands that are growing because the protons or the ions follow one another and they start to create some complex wave in the plasma itself. So you need to control it. All kinds of difficult stuff that happens when you do it on high energy. So the aim for this machine is to find out as much as possible to make the next generation a little bit bigger and a little bit less complex because you know how to control it. And then you try to slowly decrease the number of turning knobs until you have an on and off switch for your for your power plant. So that's the goal in terms of getting less complex and getting really control of the reaction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the simpler it is, the better it works by definition.
By definition, so that's what you want to grow towards. Yeah. And then it becomes, and then you can start to think of a little bit industrial, not per se mass production, but an industrial production up until a whole industry sector that is capable of building power plants. And building up the industry sector also grows exponential.
Right.
And that's why building the power plants also grows exponential, because the derivative of an exponential growth curve is also an exponential growth curve. That's why you need a little bit of mathematics to understand models when it comes to physics or the physics of economy. Mathematics is important to understand because that's eventually the language that science, the objective science, is based on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to argue with mathematics.
No, one can expand and then it becomes it's all logical steps following one another.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how many years do you reckon we're away from actually having something resembling of like a fusion power plant that's real and that works? Are you thinking like 5 years, 50 years, 500 years? Or?
No. So let's say around 50. Currently, ITER in the south of France is being built, and the plan is to have the first plasma in the mid-20s. This is around 2025.
Okay.
First plasma, and then being on full blast 10 years after that with the deuterium-tritium reaction. So then you talk about 2035. So if you would envision that a few years after that, the first demo reactors come online that demonstrate the process, but not are economically feasible reactors yet, but demonstrate the process, including making electricity out for it and connecting it to the grid. Then you're one step before building the first prototypes that really start as a high cost, in capital expenditures, high costing energy source.
But that doesn't lose money. Expensive, but not running at a loss.
As long as you could manage to have it in an ideal system, without the need of turning it off or too long maintenance. It's really close to break even.
Okay.
So you cannot have too much losses or too much hurdles on the way.
Okay.
And then you just don't lose money. But that's the step towards the next one who optimizes some step. And then you are on the way to optimize yourself until you can grow until like 10% of the energy world, of the energy supply.
Right.
Because now this whole dynamics of starting to grow is not even 1% of the energy market, but that's a promille of the energy market or even less. So up until you grow to 1% of the energy market, you need to double like for 40 years or for 30 years or so.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
To double each year.
Yeah.
And then you are at 1% and then your growth doesn't become exponential anymore, but it becomes linear. So it maintains that growth, the growth speed. And when it enters some, share of the energy world, like 10% or like 20%, it starts to stabilize a little bit around that share.
Okay.
Because the other sources also have their expansion power.
Of course, yeah.
So therefore you always will have a distribution of energy sources and not 100%.
But don't you think once this actually becomes a thing, that other energy sources would become less, right? I mean, it makes sense that once this is here, it's much more desirable to use than to burn coal, you know?
Exactly, and that's the type of energy sources that you want to lessen. Their
everyone wants that, you know. Like it's. I mean, it's great that it's here and it's cheap. It works. It's not very dangerous, but it's also very polluting and it's just bad for everything. I mean, I understand why it's a good thing, but it's also definitely not a good thing. It's so I mean, once this is here, I mean, I think people would want to. You can already tell that people want to sign up for like wind energy or solar energy, and they're willing to pay a few extra bucks to have the idea that they're, So I think once this becomes, obviously it's first gonna come in the first world countries, but
obviously. However, also in India they are doing this.
That's true. India is such an interesting place, man, because they're on the one hand they're a third world country, full on, and on the other hand they're doing like crazy shit, you know.
Investments in huge So, but it's such a huge country with such a huge income distribution.
People there, dude. It's crazy. Yeah. I had 2 Indian roommates when I lived in Australia.
All right.
They were straight off the boat from India, and best roommates I've ever had. They were so cool, and they would tell me about what life is like there, and it was very interesting to just hang out with them, and we went out to the bar a lot, and we just we hung out a lot. We were also really good friends, and it was just so interesting to kind of see what their attitude towards basic things is, like the stoplights, like it was Arkadeep and Rajat.
Right.
Yeah, they're still in Australia. I still talk with them on the phone every now and then. They're just great. At one point, Arkadeep said, Like, it's so crazy. Like, people actually wait for stoplights here, and in India, there's no stoplights, because if there were stoplights, no one would listen to him. But when I got out at the airport, I couldn't believe it. Cars actually stopped, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And he was, he was very sincere about it. And he was like, "Wow, that's crazy." He'd never seen it in his life before,
Right.
And but then he showed me this clip of this crazy traffic, this crazy road in India. Crazy chaos, like cars, scooters, trucks, scooters with 5 people on it, donkeys, cows, just this crazy road of chaos.
Right.
And then there's this lady who's crossing the street, and she just walks in a straight line, and everything that's going on the road is going fast too. It's just they're going fast. And she walks in a straight line across the street, and at the same speed, and everything just goes past her.
Right.
And she doesn't flinch, or she doesn't look around. She just keeps walking the same speed, and everything goes exactly around her. And there's a bunch of more clips like that with people just walking through traffic,
right,
and they don't get hit. And
nice.
Of course, a lot of people do get hit too, obviously. But apparently that's the system there, and most of the time it works. So it's he was like, well, like India is just so chaotic, but we're used to it. We know exactly how to deal with it. Everyone's just tuned into it, and it just works. And it was like, completely different kind of philosophy towards society, I guess. It's
and also what the individual does in that system.
Yeah, because I mean, if you jaywalk, people are like, and everyone's bothered by it. Like everyone who sees it knows instantly that it's wrong. And when you do it, it's wrong too, because you know that if you do that, there's a high chance of bad consequences. But so that's a very calculated way of organizing a society. Yeah. And in India, they're like, well, if we put up stoplights, people are not going to stop, because they just want to go there, and they can see some space there. And if he just walks at this speed, this guy can go behind him, and this car can go in front of him. Yeah. And we don't want to think so much about that kind of stuff. We'll figure it out, and they do.
Right.
That's one of the things I really took away from traveling to Bangkok and Bali.
Right.
Very different countries from each other, but more so from us. And it's a bit chaotic, it's a bit crazy, and but somehow it just works perfectly. And if we would apply the rules of our society over there, it would just disrupt everything, and no one would get it, and would just and vice versa.
Yeah.
It was just so cool to see that just a large group of human beings together figure things out to a good end result in completely different ways. And also attitude-wise, like in Bali, it's not a very rich island, and there's a lot of poverty there, but families live together. I haven't seen any homeless people there.
Right. Okay.
And I'm sure there were. Don't get me wrong, but like that's one thing that really struck me. Like if you go to any big city, you see a couple of homeless people, and but I didn't see that in Bali. And again, I'm sure there's lots of different kind of poverty going on in different kind of ways. You got slums and shit like that, but yeah, you didn't see like the homeless dude who has no purpose in life and who's just kind of
hanging out.
Yeah, and there wasn't any of that, and everyone kind of had something to do. They had their own little job or their own thing, and sometimes it would be something really small, but like someone just selling I don't know, just jobs. We wouldn't even consider jobs here, but everyone had a purpose, and I found it very interesting to see. Like, and everyone I saw also took some kind of pride in it, and there was just cool to see that different countries just come up with different
ways to do it.
Yeah. Little sidebar there. I don't know how we got here, but
nice. Yeah, that was a long way.
Yeah. Right. Damn, this drifted off pretty far. I think our steamed vegetables are about done now.
Wow.
What do you think? We take a little break, take a bite, and then finish this one off with a full belly and some fresh energy.
Cool, I like it.
All right, dude. Whew. I was grabbing a nice bottle of wine. Cheers, by the way, my friend.
Yeah, cheers.
As the night goes on and get more sophisticated, we switch from beer to wine.
Yeah.
That's
things
a good
get
one.
more fine. Yeah, that's nice.
That's a good one. Yeah, it's Fat Bastard Merlot. It's a great wine. It's not too fancy, but it's really good. All right. So we were talking about all kinds of things. We talked about so many things already that I'm not so sure what we should talk about next. Oh, yeah. We were talking about fission reactors, and as we established that the fuel that goes into a fission reactor are rods of enriched uranium, but once they are spent, that means they don't generate enough heat to be usable anymore, right? What are you left with then?
So then you have rods filled with other material, some part of the unenriched uranium, but parts of just the reaction products of it, like the smaller parts. And those are also, I believe, still a little bit in those rod shapes.
Okay.
And you need to...
So they deformed.
Yeah, they're deformed indeed. Yeah.
Okay.
But I believe still a little bit in those shapes. And that material, you cannot make use of it, and it radiates heavily, ionizing radiation. And so that's... It is gamma radiation.
It's the worst radiation, right? Or the most dangerous one, rather.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of frequencies you... but yeah. So, or beta radiation. So I think there's combinations of those. But they're the long-lived waste material. So they're like radioactive and severely radioactive. So it's really dangerous for like millions of years. Whereas if you have the radioactive byproducts that come from the fusion reactor, and that's only the tritium wall, the tritium material that got a bit infected with it actually. That's only so for like 10-ish of years. And it's not even too heavy. So these long-lived materials from the fission reaction, those are a really problem, because where do you store those? How do you transport those? That's always a difficult thing to cope with.
Well, I think they pour them in glass or something, right? And then they put them in old mines and just leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the kind of things that happen. But also there's fission reaction going on, or fission plants existing for quite long, since like the 50s already we have fission plants. And so the first, second, third generation power plants have come online with all upgrades in terms of security and how the reactor strategy, how the reactor scheme works. And now the generation 4 type of machines are with the molten salt reactor, the fast breeder concept that is really hot and that breeds is able to breed high radioactive waste away.
Okay.
So burn it, and all kind of some new, also the thorium reactor, pebble bed reactor, where you slow down in carbon composite containers, where you slow down the neutrons already for a little bit. Okay. Those are new concepts that you easily should, or that you should pursue, and that you also should progress in order to make fission also one of the 10% or 20% energy sources of the future. Because
it's getting better, more efficient.
It's getting better and more efficient, but because of all this kind of Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island in 1979.
What happened at 3 Mile Island?
That was also a nuclear facility meltdown.
Oh, I didn't know about
in the
that
States.
One.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was.
I heard about that actually. Was it near New York or?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, and that was in 79, and then in 86 you had Chernobyl, and really the enthusiasm in fission that sunk away. Because before in the 50s up till the 70s, fission was actually projected as one of the biggest energy sources of now.
Right.
I've read an old article that was published somewhere in the 50s that did a projection in how large would fission be around the year 2000. So they projected from then how the year 2000 would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about that fission was about 1/3 of the energy, the total energy production.
Well, we're not even near that, right?
No. And now it's only 7 of the electricity production.
Yeah.
So because the electricity production is only a small part of, or a part of the total electricity or the total energy production, like the crude oil and the coal and the gas.
Right.
Those are the vast majority of the energy world.
Right.
And electricity is growing with the electrification of cars and devices and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's expected to grow, which is in favor of the new kind of energy sources. Including fusion and solar and wind.
So these spent rods, there's nothing you can do with them. You cannot. Can you? I mean, you cannot shoot them into space.
Well, you can.
Yeah,
obviously.
But there's rules. I think there's rules against that or something.
Yeah, and but first of all, with or without rules, one should always think about. Do we really want to shoot this
nuclear
stuff
waste into space? Right. Yeah.
And how far do you want to be a part of it? And what if it goes wrong and it turns into some strange orbit and falls back, or
falls back? Yeah.
you don't know what happens, man.
Yeah. So you sent. Yeah. I mean, fuck. I mean, just the fact that I first questioned. Well, there's laws against that, but to not think further of the real implications of doing that. I mean, I don't know what it says about me, but
that's something you learn with physics for sure. That you sometimes need to think really concrete about what you're actually doing.
You're sending some of the worst things on Earth that we created into space, and something that just fucks everything up.
Yeah,
I mean that's not a cool thing to do,
Yeah, that's a really.
What would happen if one of those rods would just? Let's say the moon is like an Earth-like planet, and one of those rods just gets into the atmosphere there and lands in there. That's basically a nuclear missile, right?
Yeah, but
sort of, or
no, I
with
don't
the kinetic
think,
energy with the speed of it coming out of space, and
no, I don't think it would go that fast, because a nuclear missile was built to have the extreme chain reaction.
Okay,
but in the rod, I believe there's also material, so it's not only pure the uranium, but it's the uranium, but also covered in, I believe, carbon kind of stuff to already slow down the neutrons that come out of it.
Okay.
So,
but it's still something you don't want landing in your backyard.
No, for sure. But there's more people don't want in their backyards too. So there's this famous acronym, NIMBY. Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
That's about all kind of different developments that as long as they happen far away, then it's good. And as long as they help me, yeah.
It's not a good way of looking at things, but we all do it to a certain degree because otherwise...
That's true. It's really... You
can't really get around it.
Nature too. Yeah.
Well, now we're contemplating humanity and what it means to be good, I guess. No, but okay. It's not a good idea to send them into space. So we bury
them, or
but they put them in
barrels
Glassford or something, or some.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly the container is, but it's in barrels eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just barrels filled with lead or something.
Yeah, that may be the case. Yeah, but I'm not sure anymore of that. So I need to.
And what about all these stories? I don't know if it's probably true. I'm actually pretty sure it's true. Like these old nuclear submarines from the Soviet era that went to the bottom, that are laying there and rusting there with their nuclear reactors. Right? Apparently there's a lot of that. There's a bunch of those.
Okay, that I don't know.
So that I'm pretty sure it's one of those scary things that are true, but not very many people know about. But at the same time, I could be reading some bullshit. But if I'll go look for it. If I find something, I'll put some links in the show notes. But there's a bunch of, assuming this story is indeed true, there's a bunch of old Soviet nuclear submarines rotting on the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
And what's going to happen if those things, eventually those things rust and fall apart. So
yeah.
So what's going to happen there, you think?
There would be a lot of radiation, probably.
Isn't water a good isolator for it, though? Someone once told me that you could take a swim in the bath of a nuclear reactor because the water just blocks all the radiation. But because the water doesn't have any minerals in it, you would sink to the bottom, and so you still wouldn't swim in it. But if you ignore the technicality, if you were swimming away like 1 meter away from it, in theory, you wouldn't get hit with nuclear radiation. But I'm not sure if that's true either.
I'm not sure either. So that's a little bit too far in nuclear reactions on the larger molecules, actually.
Okay.
Which for me is quite a long time ago, and
so that's another field.
That's already another field that you don't need to. So you can, yeah. It's so specialized, actually.
Yeah, but it's such a big, huge, crazy thing, you know.
Yeah,
it's awesome. I mean, I think it's so cool that you know so much about it, even though you probably don't know nearly everything, you know.
No, that's true. There's a lot of
is there like
atomic material, cross section, cool stuff. How the electron position.
Is there like one person who knows a lot about everything in that field? Is there like one hero kind of guy who sort of is this genius who has his hands in every aspect of the field? Or
then you should first define what you mean with the field.
Right, yeah.
Do you mean the field? Do you think in terms of the field of nuclear fusion? Then I would say that is already too big of a field to have one hero in it anymore. So there's theoretical physics, thinking about turbulence, thinking about heating systems, thinking about diagnosing systems. So looking at the light that comes out of the machine. That was actually my master's project I did partly in Korea. I lived there for 5 months.
Oh, okay. We should talk about it too later. Yeah.
So... and that was about building a device that looks at the light that comes out of that tokamak, that plasma contained by magnets.
Tokamak, where does that word come from?
That's a Russian acronym for Toroidalna Kamera Magnetsky, something like it. And it means, freely translated, magnetic donut chamber. Or donut chamber with magnetic coils.
Wow.
Toroidal torus. You have the toroidalna torus, a torus shape. So you need a donut. Right?
Okay, right. So it was
camera magnetic. So
it sounds like a room that's magnetic.
Yeah, that is true. It's a room that's magnetic and it has a toroidal shape.
Okay.
So that you do because if you put magnets around the plasma, then the plasma particle starts in this way. If the magnet is in this way, the plasma particles start to move perpendicular
you
to it.
You just made a bunch of hand movement. So
I now rotate my... Yeah, okay, that's hard to explain. It's... Well, if the plasma rotates in a certain direction... in the other way. So if the magnetic field is in a certain direction...
Yes, in a circle?
Yeah. The magnetic current is in a circle, the magnetic field is perpendicular to it.
Okay, right,
So,
it's going through it.
Yeah.
Right.
And the plasma particles move along the magnetic field lines. But if the coil is like this in a circle, then you should envision or should visualize the magnetic field lines going perpendicular through that circle.
Right, like instead of going through the hole, hitting it from the side.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then to prevent, so you have a lot of plasma particles going from one side to the other, but then you would have really severe losses at the end, at the beginning and at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bend the machine in such a way that you connect the beginning and the end, you have, instead of your linear device, you have a torus, you have a donut shape.
Okay.
And the plasma particles move in a donut shape.
Right.
Actually, they make another move in the other direction around the donut curve, and then they move around the donut shape. And that's what they do really fast and really intense. And that's what happened in a machine. And the machine is called a tokamak.
Holy shit!
And that machine is the atoms are driven, and there's more atoms being bent into the machine by nuclear beam injection, neutral beam injection. So the neutral particles can get close to the center and then get ionized and then make part of the plasma.
And that's what creates their movement.
That's what creates a movement, because they're shut into it.
Right, yeah.
And so there's light coming out of it. And from the light that comes out of it, you can make a guess of what locally the magnetic field is like.
Jesus Christ.
And locally the magnetic field, you want to know it because you want to control how much the magnetic field of the outside coils and the magnetic field of the inside plasma are aligned somewhat.
Okay.
And due to certain alignments, you have really stable confinement in the center.
Okay.
And the device I was working on in my master's project looked at the light that comes from the center and then guessed the poloidal, so the local magnetic field. And that's because it's so hot, you cannot push a thermometer in it or some device. So you need to think of clever ways that the light, that the radiation that comes out of it, you can do something with it, and then you calculate what happens inside.
Wow.
So that's the whole part of diagnostics. Then there's the field of material science, what you do with neutrons and the wall, the wall and the plasma interaction. So where materials become brittle and neutrons shoot the material and they damage the material, and material particles start to come into the plasma. So that's the whole part of material science. Also, already a field in itself.
Right.
So it's just to get one energy source.
It's just not possible to
know everything.
It would take more than a lifetime to know.
And then already your knowledge is outdated.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's nuts, man. We live in such crazy times, and we don't even realize it most of the time. I've gone into history more recently, and the more I learn about the way people lived even like 100 years ago, Jesus Christ, we're just blessed, man.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and yet we complain about all kinds of shit. It's we live in very interesting times.
Yeah,
in so many ways too, man.
We sure do.
I mean, Like the world has changed so much since. Well, there were. I mean, we're going on into a side path here again, but Jesus Christ, I remember 9/11. There was a world before that and a world after that. You know, and there was a big thing that changed everything for everybody, and and then the first iPhone came, and you know, that became a whole different kind of, that changed society too, those smartphones. And now the internet getting into everything and the social media thing that became a thing, and where we're for the first time realizing as a society that it might actually be damaging to society, you know?
Yeah.
It's there's so much crazy shit going on, man. Like everything that's happened in the last 20 years. I mean, I don't remember the 90s much because I was just a kid, but even what happened between when I started college and what the world looks now, you know, like we live in the future, man.
Yeah, it goes really fast, and it doesn't slow down. Actually,
it only goes faster.
Yeah,
I realize that too, man. Like, I mean, smartphones are a great example because everyone can relate to that. But you had the fingerprint scanner, and now that was the most revolutionary thing for consumer electronics by a long shot 5 years ago, and now it's getting replaced by this insane 3D face scan, which scans your face with infrared light, and which is more accurate than actually taking your fingerprint. And you know, it's just mind blowing what's going on.
Yeah. Who would have thought that if you would said it like 3 years ago? If you would who would have predicted this?
Yeah, and you know, I'm not like some Apple fanboy or something. I mean, Apple makes crazy shit, and this is not about that. But just the fact that you can unlock your phone with your face, it's accurate and it's reliable, and you cannot. If you grow a mustache, or if you have a beard and you shave it off, or you wear glasses, it still picks you up. You know? Right. It just scans your bone structure. I don't know how it works, but it's just nuts. And the whole electric car thing too, and how fast computers have gotten, and all kinds of. There's so much crazy shit, man.
Yeah,
it's we sure do live in interesting times. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, we sure do.
It's a loaded quote, because you can attach any kind of meaning to it. And people have. All right, man. Well, that was very interesting, dude.
Nice.
I'm trying to think of any more questions that I have for you. And we talked for a long time. I think we probably talked for well over an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. I don't know.
All right.
But
get lost of the time.
Oh yeah, well that's a good thing, man. It means we're deep into it.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's see, what else was I think we didn't even get into quantum mechanics, but I'm afraid if we start getting into that, we'll be talking for at least another hour. And
I would say that's material for another.
Yeah, because I'm starting to feel tired. I can tell my head is tired, and I think that should tell us that we should end it right here.
Cool.
All right, man. Well, cheers to this episode. That was fucking interesting, my friend.
I liked it very much. Thanks.
Ooh. And thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have a website or a blog or a project or anything that you want people to know about? This is your promotion platform right now for the next couple of seconds.
Right. Yes, well, I just programmed my own website on guidolange.com.
guidolange.com, I'll put it in the show notes as well.
And it's under construction, and it probably will stay in that state for a while. But sometimes new stuff is being added, sometimes at the dump.
Okay.
So
you're working
today
on it?
I faced some problems like with my public and private key files and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I couldn't update to GitHub.
So you're basically building a blog or something? Or?
Yeah, something like
and
it.
You just
small
want
website.
Okay, you just want to have some content on there before you launch it.
Yeah,
Sure.
well, and currently there's some content on it.
Right.
And yeah, more will follow. It's on poetry, on physics, on...
Poetry and physics, that's an interesting combination.
Yeah, and on programming actually. So I consider I had a business card that said physicist, poet, programmer. I still have it. You can have one.
That's cool.
I'll give you one.
That's a very that's a very smooth opening line too. Hey baby, I'm a programmer, a poet, and a physicist. I can see the panties dropping. That's awesome. Shit, I bet you're the only person in the world who has that on his card. That's fucking cool,
well,
dude.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe you're right. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next time we're going to do that. I don't know when we're going to do it, but I'm sure we'll do it again because this has been great.
Cool.
And I sincerely thank you again, man.
Thanks.
Thanks, dude. All right, everyone. That was a good one. Wow, I'm tired. All right. You can, if you want to read the show notes and find out more about everything we talked about just now, you can go to thepolarizer.com and you'll see all the podcast episodes there, and you can click on them and you'll get all the information and all that. You can also find the show on iTunes. If you subscribe on there, please leave us a good review with 5 stars and a nice review with it. It really helps getting the word out. You can also follow the show on Twitter at _Polarizer. You can also find it on Facebook at The Polarizer. And you can follow me on Instagram at Dutch Diederik. That's where I post all my travel photos on and also just random podcast stuff. So check all of that out. I also have a Patreon page. So if you really get a kick out of these shows, you can become a patron and give me $1 every time I put out a new episode. And that would help keeping the show going. So I will provide a good product to you if you give me your money, man. Give me your money. No, all kidding aside, you can also support the show if you click on the Amazon button on the page that sends you to Amazon, and if you buy something on there, you will get a you'll just go through your purchase as normal, and Amazon pays me a small commission because you landed on Amazon through my website. So at no extra cost for you, next time you make a purchase in there, you can help me out a little bit too. And of course, tell all your friends about it. It's every show is free to download, and it will be forever. So do whatever you want, do whatever feels good, man. All right. Thanks again, Guido. It was good. It was cool. You're just as interesting as your brother Marnix in a very different kind of way. Nice. And I'm looking forward to the next time we're gonna do this.
Cool. Me too.
Thanks, dude.
Nice. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and tot ziens.
Whew. Bam.
Oh, boom.
You've been listening to the Polarizer Podcast. Check the show notes for links and details on literally everything that was discussed and mentioned during the show. Subscribe to this podcast for free on iTunes or your other favorite podcast directory to never miss an episode. And be so kind to give us a 5-star rating and review. Visit thepolarizer.com for high-quality articles on making life an adventure, traveling the world, being the best you can be, and other topics that fuel the fire in your soul. That's thepolarizer.com. One word, including the. Thank you for listening, and thanks for telling a friend. It really makes all the difference.
Bezocht ik voor de eerste maal mijn bovenbuur. Het had te maken met lekkage naar ik meen of met de huur. Er hing een levensecht portretje van een cirkel aan de muur. Hey, dat ziet er rood uit. Kijk. Nice. En hij ontpopte zich tot vreemde en ascetische figuur, die zich in leven hield met brokjes en augurken in het zuur. Het schikt me slecht, ik moet veel werk verrichten, sprak hij overstuur. Ik heb al jaren een obsessie en die geeft mij rust nog duur, daar ik verslaafd ben aan de cirkelkwadratuur. Als men de omtrek van een cirkel, zo begon hij zijn verhaal, gaat delen door de doorsnee. Uiteraard is die 2 keer de straal, dan komt er 1 quotient. Ja, mag ik even stilte in de zaal? Vaak zegt men 22/7, maar dat is te globaal. In feite is het 2 PR. En dat is lang niet zo banaal. Het blijkt dat pi irrationeel is en daarbij transcendentaal. En een computer heeft het uitgerekend. Is dat niet geniaal? Tot in de weet ik veel hoeveelste decimaal. Ja, deze pi, dat staat te lezen in de encyclopedie, is eeuwenoud en wetenschappelijk en Grieks en vol magie. Als ik zo pieker over pi, spreekt u wellicht van een manie, maar zijn wij Annelien, neuro, fana, roman of mystici? Een ander heeft een colibrie, een reliquie of een fobie, maar ik verdiep me onophoudelijk en zonder compromis in dit unieke en verheven wonder der planimetrie. Ik zoek het antwoord op het grote raadsel pi. Na deze woorden onderbrak hij spastisch hijgend zijn gepraat en er verscheen een onrustbarend kleurenspel op zijn gelaat. Dus ik begon al rond te kijken naar een zuurstofapparaat, maar hij bedaarde en hervatte zijn verhandeling kordaat. Er is een andere formule, die is ook niet van de straat. Een oppervlakte van een cirkel immers is pi r kwadraat. En om de waarde van die pi nu eens te zien in vol ornaat, dat is wat mij als ideaal voor ogen staat. Al dus vind ik 3,14159,265, et cetera. Ja, het heeft heel wat op het lijf. Zodat ik elke morgen bij het opstaan eventjes verstijf bij de gedachte aan de eindeloosheid van het tijdverdrijf, waarmee ik mij toch altijd weer verman en in mijn handen wrijf. Ik grijp de rekenliniaal, maar soms ook de rekenschijf. Ik zet me neer en calculeer en schrijf. En calculeer en schrijf en ik zal blijven zoeken tot ik erin blijf.
Wow.
Dat is Dr. Anders P.
That was an homage to art.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Dr. Anders P, a famous Dutch poet. Well, a light verse poet.